Hi Year 12, this is our final poem that we're going to cover. It's called Meeting Point and it's by Louis Nice. It was written in 1939. As I said, after this lesson, probably at the beginning of next week, I'll upload a quick revision of all of the poems, just one slide per poem while I talk you through the main kind of big ideas within each of the poems and how they compare to The Awakening. Okay, before we do that, I would like you to pause the video here and work your way through the daily review tasks. Off you go. Okay, so recall a line that conveys isolation within a relationship. That could have been from a poem or from The Awakening. For me, one of the big ones that stand out is Talking in Bed, Unique Distance from Isolation. Make a link between Punishment, our poem by Seamus Heaney, and The Awakening. So in both of those texts, love is oppressed by society. Recall an example of natural imagery. So it could be because his hair is brown when Edna is asked why she loves Robert. You could have chosen something from a poem as well as lots of natural imagery within our poetry that we've studied. Why was The Awakening described as too strong drink for moral babes? Now for this one you have to think right back. That was when we first introduced The Awakening as a text, and if you remember it was seen as very scandalous by society. Some online sources are incorrect and will tell you that it was censored and it was banned. It wasn't, it's just that nobody liked it at the time because it deviated from social norms just too much. Even the idea of female sexuality was seen as or considered to be immoral at the time, and so therefore it was seen as too strong drink for moral babes. List 3 contextual factors and explain how they have shaped The Awakening. So you might have mentioned the fact that Chopin grew up among really strong female role models. Her father died when she was quite young, so she never saw the submissive kind of relationship between a man and a woman. All sorts of things you could have mentioned for that one, even Louisiana being a Catholic state. Okay, so before we read the poem, I'm going to tell you the story of the poem. Meeting Point is a poem about the extraordinary way that time can be suspended during a moment of intense human connection. So it tells the story of two lovers who have met in a busy cafe or somewhere similar to that, and how they feel like the world has paused around them, like it's only the two of them there in that moment. And their love and connection is so powerful that nothing else seems important to them. Here is the poem. I'll read it through once for you, and then I would like you to pause the video and read it through for yourself. Time was away and somewhere else. There were 2 glasses and 2 chairs and 2 people with 1 pulse. Somebody stopped the moving stairs. Time was away and somewhere else. And they were neither up nor down. The stream's music did not stop, flowing through heather limpid brown, although they sat in a coffee shop. And they were neither up nor down. The bell was silent in the air, holding its inverted poise between the clang and clang of a flower, a brazen calyx of no noise. The bell was silent in the air. The camels crossed the miles of sand that stretched around the cups and plates. The desert was their own, they planned to portion out the stars and dates. The camels crossed the miles of sand. Time was away and somewhere else. The waiter did not come. The clock forgot them and the radio waltz came out like water from a rock. Time was away and somewhere else. Her fingers flicked away the ash that bloomed again in tropic trees, not caring if the markets crash when they had forests such as these. Her fingers flicked away the ash. God, or whatever means the good, be praised that time can stop like this, that what the heart has understood can verify in the body's peace. God, or whatever means the good. Time was away and she was here, and life no longer what it was. The bell was silent in the air, and all the room one glow because time was away and she was here. Okay, I would like you to read through the poem again. As you read through, I would like you to underline any examples of natural imagery that you can spot. So pause the video here and read through the poem on your own. Off you go. Okay, so on this next slide, I have highlighted in yellow examples of natural imagery. So check and see what you have underlined, and please add to it with my own picking or points there. So the stream's music did not stop, flowing through heather. Clang and clang, a flower, a brazen calyx of no noise. The camels crossed the miles of sand to portion out the stars and dates. The radio waltz came out like water from a rock, and that bloomed again in tropic trees when they had forests such as these. So all of those references to nature reflect the natural process of falling in love. So although the things like the moving stairs stops and the waiter doesn't come back, all of those things that reflect mankind and society, nature doesn't stop. Nature continues, because falling in love, McNeice conveys, is a natural process, much like a river flowing or a flower opening. It's something that can't be stopped. We can't stop nature. So by doing this, McNeice is suggesting that society can stop, but nature can't, and therefore there is no barrier, nothing to stop a person from falling in love with another person. And all of these things as well, all of these natural images in yellow, reflect some kind of movement, the movement of the stream, the movement as the flower opens, the movement of the camels across the miles of sand, the water flowing, and everything like that. Those images are contrasted with what I've highlighted in green, and what I've highlighted in green are the things that reflect mankind and society. So the bell that was silent in the air. I also should have highlighted the somebody stopped the moving stair. Time even seems to be conveyed as a social construct, something that can stop and start again. So as I said, the natural imagery reflects the natural process of falling in love, which can be likened to Chopin's use of natural imagery to convey the love that Edna and Robert feel for one another. And this contrasts with the references to society pausing. The two lovers are not fazed by social distractions, and that's much like Edna. She's willing to forget social pressures to realise her love for Robert. Sadly, Robert is not the same, and he can't shed those social shackles and can't realise his love for her. So again, pause the video and just add on those annotations for me about the contrast between natural love and society. I'd also like to pay particular attention to this stanza here. Her fingers flicked away the ash that bloomed again in tropic trees, not caring if the markets crash when they had forests such as these. Her fingers flicked away the ash. This stanza for me is particularly poignant because of the words not caring. I think it's a really good way of comparing McNeice's big idea that these two lovers are so engrossed in one another that they don't care what's happening around them. That could really easily be compared to Edna and Robert, and how Edna doesn't care what's happening around her. All she cares about is her love for Robert. So the fact that McNeice has drawn attention to the markets crashing, to the idea of stocks and shares and how they go up and down, etc., and some people become obsessed with that because for them it means monetary gain. McNeice is reflecting the idea that monetary wealth and society isn't important. They don't care about that. Something that some people can consider to be very important is completely unimportant in comparison to love. And as I said, Chopin reflects a really similar attitude in Edna's feelings towards Robert. She's willing to divert from social norms and do something completely scandalous in order to be with him. Another thing that you probably did notice as I was reading is that there are lots of repeated lines. We call a repeated line in a poem a refrain. So each stanza begins and ends in the same way. And the reason that McNeice has done this is because it reflects the idea that time has stopped for the lovers. So time was away and somewhere else, and then the poem continues, but then we're returned to time was away and somewhere else. And that changes, that first refrain changes slightly for the last stanza. Time was away and she was here, time was away and she was here. So that reflects the fact that it is her that has made his whole life change and has made time to spend in this way. And this made me think about how in The Awakening, Robert and Edna are quite happy in moments of silence together. So there's that time where Edna and Leonce fall out and Edna wants to stay outside, and she's quite happy for Robert to stay next to her and not speak to her. It also made me think about when at the very beginning of the text, Edna gets sunburnt because she's been swimming with Robert and having a lovely time. That idea that because they were together, time passed really quickly and they didn't really notice until they came back and were reminded. So ideas for comparison then. A good question to use this poem for would be any question about natural love. Or love in general, and you can make it a question about natural love if you like. So how do the writers present ideas about natural love? Both writers convey ideas about love that defies social norms. Both writers use natural imagery to reflect that love is natural, not a social construct. In your exam, you're going to be expected to compare The Awakening and 2 poems, but for now we're going to practice writing an introduction because we haven't done a lot of exam style writing, so I want to make sure that we've practiced that. So we're going to practice writing an introduction comparing just this poem, just one poem, to The Awakening. And the question will be, how do the writers present ideas about natural love? So it will be a good idea to make sure that your response is focused towards the question and to write the question down perhaps on a separate piece of paper. And then you're going to do the general specific thesis model of introduction that we have practiced. So as a reminder, G stands for general, where I want you to write a topic sentence about natural love. In order to do that, you don't have to write about the texts in your first sentence, just a general topic sentence. You could use the sentence starters that I've put in blue for you there. In literature, love is often presented as, or natural love is commonly explored throughout literature as. And just have a think about what you've learned over the last year about attitudes towards natural love. Do you think writers present the idea that love is often restricted by society? That natural love is often neglected in favour of pleasing society? So pause the video and write your general sentence. Next then is your specific sentence, where I would like you to introduce both texts and to contextualise them. So tell me about the times that they were written in. Remember, this paper is called Love Through the Ages, so you have to show a knowledge of how attitudes or thoughts change, how societies change, etc. So it's a really good idea at this point to get those marks for AO3 context and to tell me about the times in which they were written. You can use those sentence starters, written during a time in which, or though written 40 years apart, both texts, and that will just flag up to your examiner that you are aware of the time difference between the texts, and that's what they want to see from this comparative section. And then finally, your thesis should discuss the big ideas about natural love. So we'll use our classic thesis statement. It would therefore be easy to argue that both writers, what big idea do they convey about natural love? Do they want us to think that natural love is the most important, or that we can't ignore natural love or escape natural love? And I'd really like you to email me your GST introductions in answer to that question, please. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for your continued hard work. I do love seeing your emails and seeing your responses to the poetry, so well done you guys.